Good evening and welcome to the book of the Old Testament, the book of Judges, where we are right now. Side note to the class, if this were an actual class, we would have already covered Genesis through Judges, or through Joshua, it's been a late night. And we are now in the middle of examining the story of Jephthah in the context of the book of Judges. So, as we have seen, the Israelites entered the promised land. They have gotten down to the business of becoming Canaanites. That's what Judges chapter 2 presents. The Israelites are a generation who have grown up who did not know the Lord their God. That doesn't mean that they forgot about Moses, they forgot about the Exodus, they forgot about the things that God had done. It does mean that they got down to the business of being Canaanites. Canaanite theology was triangular. You had the spiritual powers here who needed faithful servants here. Faithful servants resulted in land being blessed by Baal, which resulted in the land being blessed by the deity, which resulted in faithful servants, which resulted in blessing on the land. It's this triangle, and if one leg of the triangle breaks, the whole thing collapses. The Israelites have gone full scale into Canaanite type of worship and belief and systems, and now they're in trouble, as we find in verse 10. Gideon was one of the judges who came up. Abimelech is one of the judges who came up. And in the process, the judges, each one tends to become a little bit further and further from what the standard was supposed to be, with the result that you have seemingly a death spiral for Israel. You begin chapter 1 with the remnants of the conquest. You get the statement by God that the Israelites are a generation who no longer know the Lord their God. They fall under captivity. They're delivered. They fall back away from faithfulness. They cry out for a deliverer. God raises up a judge, usually a judge who is a little bit less devoted to God than the judge before, and so on. About the only bright spot in the whole list of the judges, as you recall, is Deborah, and the way that she got Barak to act like a man and actually do what a judge is supposed to do. So we come to chapter 10. The Midianites, whom Gideon and the other judges had fought against, are off the scene. They are replaced by the Ammonites. The Ammonites are cousins to the Israelites, but they are completely different. They have gone full bore for Baalism, and they are trying to dominate Israel. Israel cries out in its distress, and this time they actually do get around to getting rid of some of the idols that they have set up. That brings a judge. His name is Jephthah. Jephthah begins with a note which is going to be critical for understanding the story. It says that he's the son of a prostitute. Prostitution in Israel is not just merely the transactional practice which is as old as time itself. Prostitution in the Bible always refers to a spiritual, physical union that results in deviation from worship of the one true God. Jephthah's father had conceived him as a result of a visit to probably what was a shrine prostitute. There are several places where those are talked about in the book of Judges, as you've seen, and the result is that Jephthah grows up as an outcast. He's pushed out of his hometown, and in fact, he becomes a pirate. Meet Jack Sparrow. Meet Jack Sparrow of the book of Judges. He is a raider. He is an equal opportunity raider. He goes up against any of the places around him, whether they are Israelite or Midianite or Ammonite or anyite. In fact, it says in chapter 11, verse 3, Jephthah fled from his brothers, settled in the Tob country. Men of low character gathered around him and went out raiding with him. So the Ammonites went to war against Israel, verse 4. They come to Jephthah, they say, come be our chief so that we can fight the Ammonites. Like Jack Sparrow, Jephthah is an awesome combatant. Jephthah replies, verse 7, you're the very people who rejected me, drove me out of my father's house. How can you come to me now when you're in trouble? The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, honestly, we've now turned back to you because we have no choice. Please come be our deliverer, you'll be our commander. Jephthah smells an opportunity, and he begins to prepare for war. He leads his army. He picks a fight with the king of the Ammonites, and they go out to Gilead, and they set up their camp. The Ammonites set up their camp on the other side of the river, and this follows a set pattern of warfare in the ancient Near Eastern world. Jephthah leads his army, and before he does, it says, then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, chapter 11, verse 29, and he marched through Gilead and Manasseh, passing Mizpah of Gilead. From Mizpah of Gilead, he crossed over to the Ammonites. So far, so good. Jephthah is marching in the strength of God. That's precisely what the pattern of warfare for Israel is supposed to be from the time of Exodus and the instructions of God there in Numbers and in Leviticus, all the way through the rest of history. That was how it was supposed to work. But then Jephthah accesses the Canaanite chip in his brain, and he makes the following vow to the Lord in verse 30, if you deliver the Ammonites into my hands, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me on my safe return from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, and shall be offered by me as a burnt offering. When Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites, verse 32, he attacked them, the Lord delivered them into his hands. He routed them. So he gets what he wants, but he's made a vow. A vow was a way of forcing the deities and the powers, and there are many vows, as we've seen in some of the other literature that we've looked at from the ancient Near Eastern world. Vows were a way of getting deities to perform for you that which you could not do yourself. So Jephthah arrived at his home in Mizpah. There was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrel and dance. She was an only child. He had no other son or daughter. On seeing her, he rent his clothes and said, alas, daughter, you brought me low. You have become my trouble. Now that's very interesting. Oftentimes when the story of Jephthah is referred to, if at all, in popular culture and outside of the Bible, Jephthah is usually presented as someone who loves his daughter, who has an only daughter, and is very concerned about her, is very passionate about her. Doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, the words that he has are blaming words on her. Alas, daughter, you have brought me low. You have become my troubler. I uttered a vow to the Lord. I cannot retract it. And Jephthah's nameless daughter becomes the sacrifice after 2 months to fulfill the vow. Now, Jephthah is left completely unchanged by the experience. As you see in chapter 12, Jephthah goes out for battle again and ends up fighting against his own people, whom he has just led in battle, and slaughters many of them. And that brings up the saying of a shibboleth. They are attacking people from Ephraim. The Ephraimites have been separated from the other side of the river, the Jordan River, and the language and the culture of the rest of Israel for long enough that they've begun to pronounce certain words a specific way. Sibboleth and shibboleth. They say shibboleth the way it's supposed to be pronounced is sibboleth. Any person trying to cross over after the battle is asked to say shibboleth, much the same way during World War II in the Battle of the Bulge, that American troops would ask who won the World Series or who lost the World Series to figure out who was a German and who was an American. Reputedly, didn't work very well in practice. They do the same thing here. It's much more effective. They're able to separate out the Ephraimites, and Jephthah becomes the proud owner of the final legacy of slaughtering 42,000 Ephraimites after defeating a few thousand Ammonites. Now, how does this play out in culture? Well, one thing that we have looked at is the use of art. The story of Jephthah is not very well known, but if you have taken a look at the artwork for this week, you'll see this lovely painting from the 1400s by an Italian artist, Benvenuto, The Meeting of Jephthah and His Daughter. That's one stylized way of looking at this incident. Notice how Jephthah is reacting in shock at his daughter's presence right there. Move forward a few hundred years to 1900, and the new medium is film. This is a still shot from Jephthah's Daughter, made in 1909, a 7-minute film produced by Vitagraph Films. J. Stewart Blackton was the producer, and this particular scene shows Jephthah's daughter rising from the grave after being sacrificed as a vindication. Very stylized, very much in the form of theatrical poses of the day. This one is much more recent. It's by an artist who goes simply by the name Cavissimo. Jephthah's Daughter in oilgraph on wooden panel, made October 25th, 2009. You notice the look of shock, dismay, and almost resignation on her face. Seems fitting for a girl who's sacrificed as a trophy of war. After all, child sacrifice had been clearly banned by God for His people at the rescue of Isaac on the mount from being sacrificed by Abraham, and yet here's Jephthah. So one thing to consider for your assignment is, and again, you need to check the passage in the Bible and its influence, page 76. What would you do if you were in the place of Jephthah? Would you have kept your vow? Now remember, you're thinking as a Canaanite, not as an Israelite. Canaanites had no problem with human sacrifice. So if you are an Israelite, basically in name only, more attuned to the Canaanite culture, philosophy, and worldview, why would you not give your daughter as a sacrifice if you've made a vow? Don't forget to do the Bible and literature, Hamlet and Jephthah. Hamlet, the play by Shakespeare, includes a scene where Lord Polonius and Hamlet discuss Jephthah as Hamlet seeks to ferret out the true intentions of Polonius's heart regarding his daughter. Thank you, and we'll see you next class time.